Greetings. Pleasure to talk about the old days in AERS because they were interesting. They were active and demanding, but there was tremendous feedback, and that's part of the fun. Actually, the first thoughts about such an organization were in Chicago. AAAS meeting attended by a small number of people from the East Coast. One Sunday morning, Willard Van Engel, Nelson Marshall, and I had breakfast. We talked about the fact that as important as communication is, there wasn't much between the people working on the Atlantic coast. There was no organization, no meetings, no opportunity to know each other, talk to each other. There should be. We thought that would be great. So the three of us set up a little committee. We developed a planning committee, which included Van Engel and Lionel Albert Wolford. Bert Walford of the Fish and Wildlife Service and me, and we started to see what we could organize. So we organized a meeting at Morehead City on the 22nd and 23rd. Now, our first meeting was in 1940. Get better than this.
That's almost 50 years ago, anyway.
It was 48. But the first organized meeting, sort of organized, was in 49 at Beaufort, Morehead City more properly, at the University of North Carolina Fisheries Institute. And we found 22 people who were working on estuarine research and interested and could come, including 2 women. And we met there at the old Morehead City lab and talked about what we were trying to do, how we might do it, who should be members, what the patterns might be that would be useful to us. We talked about the name. We considered perhaps half dozen names for a group. The one we avoided most aggressively was Atlantic Research Society for Estuaries, because the acronym wasn't really fully delicate. We didn't want to tap to that. We finally came around to the rather awkward one, but appropriate one, Atlantic Estuarine Research Society. We planned a meeting that fall, and we organized with Al Chestnut, who was the host, for Don Pritchard to come and speak. Don was just coming from the West Coast to the East Coast as the new director of the new Chesapeake Bay Institute. And he was a star, he was a good one. Well, over the years, we evolved a pattern. We really didn't have papers presented in the earliest years. We had discussions. Somebody would bring up a topic and talk about it a bit, then everybody would get into it, and we'd talk till we were tired of talking about that, then change it. There were no time limits, there was no abstracts, there was no formality of any kind, and all at a level of exchange that was easy and fun for everyone. And we learned enormously, just enormously. I think the best image of it was someone giving a talk on how oyster larvae moved in the estuary. I've forgotten who that was, and Pritchard just jumped up. He said, it cannot be that way. It doesn't happen that way. It doesn't work that way, and I'll tell you why. And he did. And we learned. And he learned some biology as well, of course. But things like that were happening constantly because of the open informality, largely, and the newness of the field. None of us knew much about much. So for maybe 10 years, we were able to keep that very high, very easy simplicity. But then the numbers began to overwhelm us. You can't do that with a large group. And that began to move, and it was discussed and cussed and fought hard as to whether or not we'd have formal papers of any kind, and how long they could be, and whether or not we'd have open discussion or time discussion. And a lot of us dragged and dragged and dragged for the old way, but you can't do it. You can't get there that way. So we evolved into the pattern, really, that still exists, and that was a beer blast on Thursday night someplace on the coast, Friday and Saturday morning. It was technical sessions, more or less, and then break about noon Saturday, and that's still very useful. Lots of interesting people came. There were a lot of old-timers who were pretty exotic. And they had no hesitancy in saying what they thought and doing what they wished. Part of the value of AERS has been those connections with old timers and young timers, because they're just as fun. But I remember seeing Van Engel dance the mating dance of the blue crab, and that's incomparable. You ought to see it once. I don't know whether you ever taped it or not. I would hope so. I remember Bill Massman. Bill became famous for bringing a roll of brown wrapping paper, hanging it up on an easel, rolling it out, and writing his lecture notes, so to speak, particularly on the abundance of shad in the Virginia rivers. Every fall, Bill would talk about how many shad there were in the rivers. Now, this was talking about how many shad were there last spring. And I remember once somebody said, "Bill, do you have any confirming evidence?" He said, "No, who's going to prove I'm wrong?" He's right, of course, so we didn't go back and repeat. But there were so many people who just did their thing their way. And we all kidded them and chuckled and laughed and had a great, great time. There were also serious sessions. We had some sessions in cooperation with the AIBS and other groups various times. But mostly the essential meetings were the spring and fall AERS meetings, everywhere from hotel bars, the old Log Inn out here at Sandy Point, which was then about on its last legs. We went out there for a meeting, got there, had our party Friday night, woke up Saturday morning, there was nobody in the kitchen. So we just took over the kitchen and cooked breakfast and made do and had a good time. It's that sort of an outfit. Again, you can't do that with a big group. That was part of the fun. We've also gone to fancier hotels occasionally, college campuses, and marine laboratories, federal and state laboratories, and all together had a quite nice variety of settings. Mesquite Lodge was nice isolation one year, good spot. All this time, the papers, presentations were varied. They were interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary. Most of them were biological. Always have been, because the population is largest in that field. I wondered about what's so good about AERS and what troubles might come to us in the future. We'll talk about the troubles first. Problem of size, finding places that can handle a large group and keep that essential informality and exchange. I think this is why the beer blast is important, because that is the best opportunity to chat with a lot of people, hear from a lot of people. And you don't get many opportunities like that. But I think we should preserve that as well as we can. I think that we'll never run out of topics as long as we have bright young people. They will keep thinking of good questions and tackling them hard. I'm not a great fan of poster sessions. I just don't think there's a personal contact at a poster, even when the author is there. It's not as good as we can do, and I hope we can maximize the personal presentation. But I know people have to justify their trip, and sometimes that's the only way they can get to the meeting. We talked about the positives a little bit. I'm not sure what they are. I could say it's the informality and the flexibility of the thing, but remember, we have 5 descendants, 4 descendants really. New England Estuarine Research Society was patterned on AERS partially, South Atlantic, Gulf Coast, and Pacific Coast. Now they all arose after us, because of us, and a little bit on our pattern, but they're all different. New England is starchy. New England has always been much more formal. I don't know the others as well, but I know that it isn't just described a predictable formula that we've given them that they've taken and copied. They've made their own. The essence of it is getting people together so that they can be, for at least part of the program, informal and personal, and learn a lot, both formally and at the at the bar, if you will. I think as long as we can preserve that, we'll keep going. It's just very impressive to me. We've kept going for 50 years. It's been such a fragile organization. We lost the Constitution several times. We suspended it several times, and only sometimes did we reinstate it. It's just been something that has its own life, has its own vitality, and that's what's kept it going. Just a word on some recommendations for the future from my aged and weakened perspective. One is, I worry a little about computers and field work, and I would like to suggest a rule of 11 to 1. Anyone who works on computers relating to estuaries, as variable as they are, as interesting they are, and as challenging as they are, should have to work at least 1 month a year in the field. Get out on boats, on the mud bottom, onto the sampling gear, someplace out in the field where they're learning what the original data meant. I think probably the reverse is true. Anybody that works full-time in the field ought to have to go into the computer lab and see what they do there, and see how they can do, and how it can do his work with him better than he can do it alone. This may not be administratively feasible, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about what would give us the best life and the best quality in our achievement. I hate to see people isolated in a lab basement with a computer that never get beyond that. I don't think they get the most or give the most. I'd like to encourage all the laboratories to keep a few crazies around, keep a few of the people who don't fit the pattern, who have their own ideas of things, who stir up everybody else from time to time. I can't describe them perfectly because it's not a simple case, but I think that the different people in the group sometimes contribute more than anybody else. So anyone who has the opportunity to steer that, I would encourage you. Keep a few of them around. It's good for you. And I think the last thing I would have to say is, whatever the magic is, it's been good magic. And I think AERS will continue for another 50 years, maybe 100.